And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing this front edging eastward here, bringing the strongest winds into the Alaska Peninsula, on up to the Pribilof Islands with snow trending toward rain in those areas. Much lighter winds and more showery conditions for the eastern Aleutians. Dry and cold over interior Alaska tonight with temperatures below zero just about everywhere. And for the southeast coast, periods of rain or rain and snow depending on your elevation and latitude there. Through the night, next system down here tracks northward to about this position, bringing the front up along the central and south coast areas. So that'll be another round of increasing winds and rain, possibly heavy at times, again over the southern areas, lighter to the north, but some of this leftover moisture from the first system starting to edge into the eastern Copper River Basin in the form of light snow. Otherwise, another clear, cold day over interior Alaska. This front weakening now, not making much more eastward progress, coming northward a little bit there, tightening the gradient up over the northern Bering Sea for the strongest winds in that area. Lots of snow showers out over the Aleutians, especially over the central and western areas. And then for Saturday, a new front develops here with a stronger low back to the west. That brings more rain and snow into the eastern Aleutians, but the winds not nearly as strong as with today's front. And this is the remnants of that front here, bringing maybe some precipitation to the Kodiak Island, light amounts for the Bristol Bay area, southwest coast, and more clouds and chances of light snow here over the eastern interior. And of course, that translates to a little warmer temperatures. Better chance of snow in Prince William Sound and the Copper River Basin. More clouds, a little milder south central Alaska. And this front keeps it wet and unsettled for the southeast coast. Coastal water forecast, gale warning, central and south coast tomorrow, south or east to southeast winds, 35 knots with higher gusts, central coast east at 25, and the north coast, variable winds out of the north to east, 10 to 15 knots. Northern central inside waters, north winds, 15 knots. Clarence Strait, southeast wind, 20 knots. For Saturday, northwest winds, 15 knots for the south coast, and west-northwest at 15 to 20 knots here on the central coast. And north to southwest winds, 15 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, southeast at 15. Central inside waters, variable to southwest at 10 knots. In the southern areas here, particularly Clarence Strait, west winds of 15 knots. North Gulf Coast, north winds, 15 to 30 knots with higher gusts tomorrow. North 15 for Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, light winds out of the northeast, but small craft advisories. Southern Cook Inlet, northeast 25, turn north at 25 knots for Kamishak Bay, and then northwest at 25 for the Barren Islands. And for Saturday, much lighter winds, northeast 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet, northeast 15 Kamishak Bay, northwest 15 for the Barren Islands, and for the North Gulf Coast, west to southwest winds at 15 knots, and a light northeast breeze from the northeast at 10 knots for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, east-northeasterlies tomorrow at 20 knots. Small craft advisories for Bristol Bay, east winds 30 knots, but those seas only at 3 feet. And gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, southeast winds 40 knots. For Saturday, Alaska Peninsula, south winds at 15 to 25 knots, southeast 20 for the Bristol Bay area, and east to southeast, 15 to 20 knots for Kodiak Island. Eastern Aleutians, south to southeast winds, 25 to 30 knots for the day Friday. And the Adak-Atka area, westerlies, 25 to 30 knots. West 30 to 40 knot winds turn northwest at 40 knots from Kiska to Shemya. And then for Saturday, west winds here at 30 to 45 knots there for the western Aleutians. Adak and Atka, southwest at 30. And for the eastern Aleutians, south to southwest, 20 to 25 knots. And the southwest coast tomorrow, east winds 25 to 30 knots. Norton Sound, northeast at 25, turn east at 25 for St. Lawrence Island. Storm warnings out for St. Matthew Island, east winds 50 knots, seas 22 feet, southeast at 30 for the Pribilofs. And then for Saturday, those storm force winds drop down to gale force out of the east at 40 for St. Matthew Island, south 20 for the Pribilofs. Southwest coast, east winds, 25 knots. Northeast at 20 for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. And for the Chukchi Sea tomorrow, northeast winds 10 to 25 knots, and northeast at 15 for the western Arctic coast, and 10-knot winds for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coastlines. And then on Saturday, for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north winds 15 to 20 knots, northeast at 20 knots for the central coast, brisk wind advisories for the western Arctic coast, northeast winds here increasing to 25 knots, and then northeast winds 20 to 35 knots for the Chukchi Sea.